So we are recording this, and it'll be uploaded within a day or two. I'll share the link with everyone because it takes the town longer to get it up on the website. So the main purpose of this meeting, Hillary, was to have a conversation with you on where we stand on all our grants, where you think we're going on.
Okay. Okay. So I can kick off with telling you that we just completed the first round of our Coastal Resiliency Grant. That was a regional grant that Wellfleet was the lead on, and we participated with Eastham, Truro, and Provincetown. And through that, we developed an extensive database, and we're going to continue to refine that as part of the Phase 2 CZM Coastal Resiliency Grant. Along with the database, we created a framework of regulations relative to conservation and some zoning in that, with the goal of hopefully all sharing the same regulations and bylaws regarding climate change and resiliency measures. And one of the deliverables as part of that was an MOU with the town administrators and board of selectmen in each town to agree to continue to work together regionally. So all of that went into Phase 1, and it was a pretty large undertaking, and there's a great amount of work and data in the database. So it compiles all of our regulations, it compiles all of our wetland resources, it compiles sea level rise data, floodplains, all kinds of things like that. So Phase 2, and also I should say in the database for Phase 1, we worked with beach administrators, police, fire, and DPW to get layers of data for stormwater, catch basins, emergency access points, and roadways. So that was all Phase 1. So I can pause there and answer questions.
Is the database available online?
So it will be publicly available, but Phase 2 is gonna give us ways that we can share the data from that, because it's a huge GIS file, and we don't have the capability to run it on our equipment. But Phase 2 will lead us in that direction so we can access the data and use it.
So what does it take? What kind of equipment does it take to run it?
So it takes ArcGIS, which is the mapping software, and it takes the ability of someone to know how to do it. So someone who's highly trained in that. So right now, Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies are the only folks that can do it.
The GIS software runs on a local computer. Is that it? Not in the cloud?
Yeah. So like other towns have like People GIS software. So we're going to look at different ways to make it accessible to ourselves as town staff and the public without having to rely on an external source for it.
Do you know if there is like anyone on Amazon offers a service, or?
No, no one offers the service on Amazon. We have the ArcGIS software. We just never have the time to devote to actually using it. And then Provincetown Center has to put it into a format that will be accessible to us. So like these other towns have, town-wide GIS software that the public can access. Wellfleet's just not there yet. So we did put money in the municipal budget for IT needs that included that, but I have no idea if that's going to get cut out because of COVID and expenses and that sort of thing. So Phase 2 of the CZM Resiliency Grant will make this data accessible.
So an Amazon Web Services account is a few dollars a month, right? So the only question.
So I don't know what Amazon, I guess I'm pretty fluid in Amazon, but I've never seen them offer any kind of like onward database or mapping software.
Well, they do. Amazon Web Services will host anything. The question is,
This is not the Amazon you're thinking in terms of the store, but rather it is the cloud computing.
Okay, because yeah, I'm not familiar with that, and I don't know if municipally we'd be able to use it, but I think if we wait another year, we'll be able to figure it out. So I guess I'm hopeful that the town will invest in a software package that allows us to run software like the other towns on the Upper Cape are. We're just in the dark ages.
well, before we invest in some proprietary package sitting on someone's computer somewhere, maybe Jeff and I could look at what the alternatives are to host it in the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, totally. If you can find a way, I'm happy to have you work on that, and then we could work with Provincetown Center to include that in our suite of options for sure.
Okay.
Hillary, can you talk a little bit about what else is involved in phase 2?
Yeah, so in phase 2, we are going to further refine the database. We took in a lot of comments from town staff and the public on things that they'd like to see and things that they think would be useful. So we're going to continue that. We're going to find a way to make that information accessible to the public. We are going to continue to work on best policies and practices for conservation commissions regarding various types of projects. So like rock walls, beach nourishment. So beach nourishment is a big one because we know that the way we're doing things now isn't exactly the smartest way, and it's not regionally appropriate. So looking at things based on littoral cells instead of individual property lines, and really managing our resources regionally, I think is a better approach, because if we're all doing the same thing and the same rules apply, it's easier for folks to comply as well. So it makes enforcement a bit easier. It makes regionalizing certain aspects of our projects a little bit easier with staffing shortages and that sort of thing. And it's better for the resource because the resources know no town line. So it further pushes that ball along. That being said, Wellfleet has taken the lead also on a Dca grant where we are redrafting our Conservation Commission regulations for climate change and sea level rise. And having that blend with the bylaw that we drafted last year with APCC. So that project is underway as well. We just signed a contract with Horsley Witten to redraft our regulations. And once those are redrafted, we would share those with the Outer Cape towns along with the bylaw. So that's moving forward as well. But as part of the Resiliency Grant, we would come up with policies and management directives for different types of projects in different locations, such as floodplains, low-lying areas, salt marsh. We're going to look at possibly buying properties and identifying properties that abut salt marshes so that we can have those on our radar for when and if any funding comes available. So we would have a database of all of those properties as well. We know that we need salt marshes, and it's a really important resource that we want to try and get within our inventory of land. So that's part of the grant as well. And then we're going to look at a couple of low-lying roads and see if we can get designs underway to raise them up as well. So
your sound seems to be dropping out, Hillary.
CVM Phase 2 Resiliency Grant work.
Hillary,
your sound is getting a little distorted. And you said something about a DCA grant. What?
It's a District Local Technical Assistance Grant, and it's issued by the Cape Cod Commission.
Okay.
So they're funding a portion of the regulation work, as is the Conservation Commission.
Mm-hmm. So, Suzanne, how does this map into what we thought we were applying for in grants?
I was going to ask the same question because Hillary is working on that low-lying road MVP plant with, grant with us. She's the project manager. So,
And so that's different. That's different than anything I've discussed so far. So we can move into that and how they go together.
Okay.
If we're done with CZM, I'm happy to talk about the MVP grant as well. Yeah.
You're throwing the names out, the acronyms too quickly for me.
I'm sorry. CZM, Coastal Zone Management.
Okay.
That's a mass state agency. MVP is the Municipal Vulnerability Programming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's through the Mass Office of Environmental Affairs.
Okay.
And that goes along with the workshop we conducted, what I feel like was last year, but maybe it was the year before now, because I've lost all track of time.
It was the year before, yeah.
So that goes with that. And the DLTA is something that the Cape Cod Commission offers. I think it's once a year. And they've been very generous to Wellfleet. So the MVP grant is a larger regional grant with a number of towns on Cape Cod, which I can't remember now, but Barnstable, Truro, Eastham. Provincetown is not participating in that, but a number of towns across the Cape, and we're serving as the lead. And that's going to look at low-lying roadways, all low-lying roadways in all of these towns. And then they will pick a roadway in each town to look at raising up in the floodplain. So that's a larger regional project, and that will play in. So I guess what I found in doing all of this work is that none of these agencies or organizations work together. And that's probably the number one most frustrating part of this job, is that the right hand never knows what the left hand is doing. So, Cape Cod Commission doesn't use any of the data the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies collects, and Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies always works very closely with CZM and NOAA. So it's just, it's interesting, but the work doesn't overlap and doesn't dovetail into one another. So I was hopeful that if we took a low-lying roadway work on one of the grants and then put the information together from the other grant, we could begin to travel the path together. So that's my larger goal and my larger hope in participating in both of these grants, is that eventually we will get all of these folks to communicate together and share the same data, because Provincetown Center actually does on the field groundwork and ground truth what they do. And they've done the storm tide pathway work, which shows actually where the flooding comes in and where that will go. And that information is not publicly available yet either, because they're still refining it and finishing it up for Wellfleet. So that data will go into the CZM grant, not the MVP grant. So the MVP grant is going to look at other data points, and we'll be able to see how they line up once both grants are completed.
And will you be able to view all the data together in a single platform?
That's what I'm extremely hopeful of.
That means
It could be
no?
wishful thinking. It could be wishful thinking on my part, but it depends on how the data sources combine together. But it will at least bring all of the data to the forefront so we can evaluate it all at the same time.
And Hillary, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I don't know if Heather McElroy had mentioned it or not, but we were planning for the fall cycle MVP to look at vulnerable buildings in the low-lying road areas as a complement to the MVP grant that we're now working on. So, you know, same, very similar project, regional, hopefully, with the Cape Cod Commission sort of administering the whole thing. But in this event, it would be for public buildings, private, commercial, municipal. So I don't know if you had been made aware of that.
I have not been, and that's fine. I wonder, you're gonna look at private, like, dwellings?
That's what's written down. You know, right now it's a kind of a blueprint idea. I mean, it's loosely, you know, looking at it. We're going to talk about it more at the end of the summer with Heather McElroy. I was curious as to whether residential would be appropriate under this.
I don't think municipally we should fund work on private property. I think we should hone our efforts on municipal property because I just don't think that's a good use of municipal money at this point in time. We have the data to see where the low-lying properties are that would be in jeopardy, but we can't bring about a change for any private property. So I'm not sure we should spend our time and our resources sort of even looking into that at this point.
Well,
even assessing, because this would be once again hiring a consultant to assess and make recommendations.
I mean, we can leave it in there, but I think it would be better if we could hone our efforts for municipal and public buildings or public spaces first, and then maybe have that as a phase 2.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense to me.
Suzanne, you were talking only about identifying the risks, not about doing anything or mitigating it, right?
Right. This is just purely having a consultant come in and identify and make recommendations on what can be done.
Yeah, I think people are really funny about their private properties, and I would be nervous to go down that path.
Okay, that's a really good conversation to have. Yeah.
I think the idea, as I would see it, is to have it's a community service, and there's no way it's going to do the work for the private homeowner. There's no way that the assessment is going to require them to do anything that I can see. It's just simply information that they could get free of charge, and it'll provide a potentially very useful database and set of information for some ways down the road when maybe there is some way to help them out. But right now, it would simply be, here community, here's an assessment of low-lying areas, end of story.
I guess I feel like you're kind of then just like dangling the bait. You're not giving them any real information that they don't already know, because I guarantee to you everyone in those properties knows it because of flood insurance and just by basic site surveying.
I agree with Hillary also. I think it may open up a hornet's nest of opposition for people who are afraid we are going to use this to make demands on them and their property that we probably don't want to be fighting that fight right now. People are very neurotic about things like this.
And I think the slower and more incrementally you go on something progressive like this, the better, is what I found.
There's no question that it's controversial and it's very difficult. I think part of what we're trying to do is push the envelope a little. I totally get how things that are threatening can best be done incrementally, but we're just trying to think creatively about how we can be more prepared, because if we just do nothing, and maybe that's the decision that will be made, then everybody's on their own. There'll be some catastrophic hurricane or flood, and it'll just be the usual stuff of flood insurance, fix it up, rebuild.
And that information is already accessible. So if you go onto MassGIS, you can click on the floodplain layer, and you can click on salt marsh. Like, you can already access and find that information. So that information is publicly available. And I guess I worry the second you go and hire an engineer or consultant to do it, I wouldn't be comfortable meddling into the private realm until we first look at the public pieces and see what that looks like and how that process goes.
Just a question on low-lying areas. I'm just trying to get a clear understanding on what happens to, like, you know, state highway, in this case, Route 6. Is that something that the state worries about and welfare
Yes.
just deals with local roadways?
Exactly. We don't have jurisdiction over mass highways.
Hillary?
Great.
Yeah.
Hillary? What is
Yeah.
the relationship between what we're doing with these low-lying areas and what the Herring River project is going to do with low-lying areas? Is there any conflict there
So,
or overlap?
well, some of our lowest lying roads are within the Herring River floodplain, and depending on who's doing the work assessing the low-lying roadways and what data they're looking at to identify them, they may or may not call those out. But anybody working in Wellfleet and working directly with me would receive information that, you know, these roads are slated for elevation during the Herring River project if and when that goes forward. So, so I think whoever we choose as our consultant, and I believe they wanted Woods Hole Group. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
For the MVP grant, I think they wanted Woods Hole Group. So Woods Hole Group would be fully aware of Herring River.
Okay.
I think
You know,
it's
and I would say probably, to be fair, a lot of the big consulting firms are aware of it and have worked on some part of Herring River or another. So, so I think that's fine. Well, I mean, and we would inform them of that. So we wouldn't want another consultant dealing with those roadways because we're already dealing with them.
I think it's a mistake to focus vulnerabilities only on town-owned property. I think that's doing a disservice to the whole community. I'm not saying that we should pay for the work, but the vulnerability study itself is something which individuals really can't do. And I don't understand why. It's a little bit like the concerned about the town buildings and what they do and not doing anything about all the residents, because the bulk of the...
Well, we don't have jurisdiction. I mean, if you have a building that's particularly vulnerable, the town can't do anything about it. Like, the town's not going to pay for you to build a new flood-resistant foundation.
I didn't say anything about paying, and the vulnerability is looking at what's vulnerable. It doesn't say who will pay for what. And to bring people in here to do the study and totally ignore all, you know, residential property, I think is doing the town a disservice.
Hillary, can I ask you how, as far as the MBC grant that you have for low-lying roads, and then the one that, is that also coming from the Cape Cod Commission, and then the one Suzanne's working on is also coming from the Cape Cod Commission? I mean,
no, the CZM one is
okay.
That's the regional. That's different than anything the Cape Cod Commission is working on.
Okay, so the CZM is a funding source for the vulnerability grant that you're working on. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And,
ahead.
As far as, I would think that you would be made aware of any grants that the Cape Cod Commission would be offering. Do they keep you informed?
I mean, I'm aware of grants that they make available, but
Okay.
With my staff of 2, we
Right.
can't tackle any more than, you know, than our current workload, because it's just, with the reporting and the work and the follow-up, it's just, you know, unmanageable.
Okay. I mean, how can we be streamlined with you so that we can all be coordinated and all be on the same page and help each other?
So that's a good question. And I'm not sure I have the answer today. If we didn't have COVID, I would have a lot more time and energy to put forth into thinking about a way to better communicate or participate in your meetings. But with health and conservation and COVID and CZN, like, I am totally tapped out right now. So I would say if we could continue to communicate, that's great. I guess I need to be aware of what you're doing, and you should be aware of what we're working on, just so that our grants don't, compete with one another, because that's not a good thing either, because it shows that our town isn't communicating very well. So it's important that we maintain communication, but I'm not sure how best to do that at this moment in time.
Thank you.
Hillary, can I ask how the one low-lying road in Wellfleet is going to be chosen and when?
Yeah, we haven't even been accepted. We haven't even been given or awarded a grant through MVP yet. So once that process is complete, then we would move forward and work on that. But we don't know yet.
Okay.
Have you had any visibility into what other towns on the Cape are doing to, come up with, say, a prioritized list of low-lying roads, so when money starts to flow, we've got something ready to go?
Well, that's why we're doing these 2 grants, right? I mean, we have some roadways identified in like our hazard mitigation plan, but we don't have anything that's shovel ready. So the hope is through these 2 grants, we would get shovel ready projects.
Hillary, you mentioned that there were 2 state organizations that aren't communicating well. Could you just repeat those, which ones those were?
Sure, it would be the CZM and the Cape Cod Commission. And I've had this discussion with Heather at the Cape Cod Commission and Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies. So I think folks are fully aware of other work going on. The Cape Cod Commission is truly interested in our CZM work. And I think, on the Outer Cape, we're sort of special, and we're building this regional coalition that's quite strong and will give us better abilities to actually receive grants when we put them in regionally. So I don't know, we have a really good thing going.
Yeah, I know that but you also mentioned 2 state organizations. Was that different?
That's just the Cape Cod Commission, and then it would be the CZM.
Okay.
So they're not exactly state organizations. Well,
No, I
CZM
know,
is, and Cape Cod
I know
Commission.
both, so thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
So are we applying for other grants that you're not aware of, Suzanne, or what else?
I think Suzanne and Carol have done a pretty good job of staying in communication with me. So I think what we have is working. I just, I wasn't aware of the low-lying buildings, and that's fine. I don't, I need to know that it's going on, but I don't need to be intimately involved.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is like not a definite go ahead as of yet. But I'm just wondering if it's going to be the same structure as the low-lying roads, where Heather might ask you to, do the reporting and managing and all that for, I just wonder if it's almost going to be like part 2 of. Well,
and that's fine. Like, as long as it's well structured and someone just tells me what they need me to do, I'm happy to do it. But I can't, I need to have a good team working with me. And with the Cape Cod Commission, I think that's fine, because they'll do a bulk of the work, and then we just review it and put our name on it. So I am comfortable doing that. And again, if it's for a regional project, then I'm all for it, because we're stronger as a region.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess I feel very strongly about that type of project. So I am willing to participate in that.
Yeah. And what we're thinking is that, if Heather is not available to do it, the MVP, to do this part 2, say, in the fall, then push it to the spring. I just think it makes sense to do it. It's just a matter of when she can work with us on it. And they're thinking maybe for the fall, but that's not guaranteed. So.
Yeah, that works for me.
So is there anything else that we're interested in asking Hillary about? Can you tell us more about the planning, the zoning? You have a zoning bylaw in the works?
So I don't have a zoning bylaw in the works. We have a conservation, our conservation bylaw, which is the Wellfleet Environmental Protection Bylaw. We have redrafted that last year with the help of APCC, and it's really good. It takes into account climate change and sea level rise and migrating salt marshes. And in order to have it be effective, we have to update our regulations as well, so that we have regulations that allow for these things and allows for green infrastructure and all kinds of different things than we currently allow for. So the two will dovetail together, and then we would present a complete package. The bylaw obviously needs town meeting approval, and the regulation just needs public meetings and hearings.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding that the overall zoning bylaw issue is being worked on by the Cape Cod Commission. I know they are, but not for Wellfleet specifically. And what Heather McElroy told me a while back is that their intention is to create kind of a toolkit of model zoning bylaws and other sorts of other tools in the toolkit that individual towns could take advantage of. She didn't know when the zoning bylaw project, it might be in Eastham, I'm not positive. She didn't know when that was going to be done. It's very slowed down because of COVID. At one point,
Yeah.
it was completely on pause. I'm not sure it is today. So
yeah, they were waiting for funding. They were waiting for funding from some big organization, and the funding came in, and that is part of some larger toolkit that they're working on. But what I find is their larger toolkits are totally unhelpful and of not much assistance directly to us. So that's why we have our own planning effort underway to get us what we want. So it's usually like too unwieldy to unpack to make it useful. They've done a lot of planning, and some of it is really great, but it's not really totally functional for municipalities to pick up and run with.
Okay.
So Hillary,
And again, I had this conversation. Yep.
yeah, okay. I think you're going to answer what I'm going to ask. Yeah. I mean, have you had this conversation with them, and is there any way that they can address your concern?
Yes. So I've had this conversation with Heather on more than one occasion, and she tells me she hears me and she understands, and then we just sort of move on. So I don't know. I mean, I think the Cape Cod Commission is great. They have a lot of great resources and a lot of great tools, and they develop a lot of great things, but it's not directly useful.
Doesn't sound useful. Not directly useful.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I wish it were, but I mean, they are funding our little project in Wellfleet. So, I mean, I have the utmost respect for what they do and the work that they generate, but you know, we kind of need to tackle it on our own.
So Hillary, maybe Dick and I can be of help to you. I mean, can you send an email with your concerns? If there's something we could do to, you know, to make things more useful to Wellfleet, maybe, you know, is there anything we can do?
You know, like I said, I've had the conversation with Heather. They're particularly useful, like when we reach out to them for individualized help. You know, like they're helping us a great deal with our wastewater planning. Erin Perry's amazing. Like Chrissy's great, but it seems like we need to reach out to them specifically for what we need help with, and not just take their general like guidance, or their guidance is just that, it's just guidance. So it's not, you can use it or you cannot, you can access it or not, like it's not, I don't know how to explain this, but
yeah. I mean, that makes sense. You know, that their guidance would be guidance, you know, for each one of the 15 towns, and the towns are so different. But then if you reach
Right,
out to
right.
the specifics, then they would help you. I mean, is that
Right,
fair to-
and that they do, and right, so that they do. So they may have this giant toolbox of like regulations, and you can pick and choose what you want, but then you really need to reach out to them to make it work in your town, or so that they can refine this aspect of it, or like they developed that, I don't want to throw this acronym out again, this MVP model for wastewater, which is different than any of the MVP we've been talking about today, and that's fine, and that's great. But that doesn't really get us to a wastewater plan. Like it's a tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, that makes sense, Hillary, because how can they do something for guidance for Wellfleet and at the same time Barnstable and have it directly
Well, and I think,
useful?
yeah, and I think that's why I find it so frustrating, because I only work in Wellfleet, right? And I want us to all be doing things kind of uniformly across the Cape, but what they do in Barnstable, you're right, is totally different than what we do in Wellfleet. So I get very frustrated.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like you need another staff person to actually help with implementation of things more than anything else. I mean, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're working as hard as you possibly can, and you can only do so much. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. I can only do so much, and no one was expecting COVID to come along and give us all this other stuff to do. So it's been really difficult, and I want to help as much as I can, and especially on regional projects, which I'm all in favor of. So.
Mm-hmm. What other grants do we have in the works, Suzanne? The Green Communities probably doesn't affect much, right? That's an energy conservation grant, right?
Right, yeah. Well, we're done for 2020, except for this MVP grant. And then we're going to start thinking about 2021.
2020 is almost over, right? Used to be over July.
Yeah, we have to start. We have to start planning out for that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to go back and review. We have, well, no, Carol's going to bring something up today. She sent something out. We were going to discuss that during the grant.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the discussion today.
Okay, this is part of the.
Okay, Carol, do you want to talk to that? And then there's a couple of other ones that we worked with David on. We were looking for ideas. We're actually at the point now where we have to prioritize for 2021.
Oh, good. So can you send me your list so I can just have a look at it and see what's on there? Okay, because that'll be good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And we're looking for, so we're thinking that we can manage maybe 3 grant projects a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
At this point.
So I can tell you, I've managed 2. I've managed 2. The CZM one was enormous. So depending on the size, 3 sounds reasonable if that's your sole workload.
Right. 2 to 3. After that, I think it gets a bit scrambled, doesn't it? I mean.
Yeah, it's too difficult to keep things in track and online and keep your contractors working well.
Exactly. And organizing ahead of time to make sure that everybody's all lined up and everything's meeting ready.
Yeah. And you guys are volunteers too, so don't, overtax yourself here.
Yeah. So we're trying. I think we have 3 that we can work with potentially, and I'll definitely send that to you.
That's good. Okay, great.
So, Carol, you're going to talk to the grant? You're muted.
Oh, yeah. We have to unmute her.
Carol, you're
Can
on
I ask
mute.
if you have?
Okay.
Do you have any more questions for me? Because I've got another call to get on to.
Does anyone have more questions? Well, thank you for spending
Yeah, thank you.
time with us.
Thank you, Hillary.
Okay. I'm
you.
here if you need me. Email me or call me. I'm available, and I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you, guys. You're doing good work.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. So the thing that I sent out was an article from the Cape Cod Times about the sea bin, which it collects pollution in harbors. And it was an article about one that was gotten by the Island Queen and set up in Falmouth Harbor. And it's the cost was $5,000, $5,600, and $1,000 in shipping costs. And the article ended with the idea that it would be a great thing for municipalities to do. And if we could find the right grant, it seems like a small ask.
What does the device do?
It's called a sea bin, and it collects plastic from the harbor.
Oh,
It needs to be emptied twice a day. So obviously the harbor master staff would need to go along with this. And, you know, one of David's suggestions had been that we work on harbor, the Wellfleet harbors. So I wondered whether this would fall under the Energy Committee's auspices. I'm just interested in what people think.
One thing that occurs to me, Carol, that might make simplify things and clarify quite a bit is just a quick. Can you hear me?
there's some echo.
Yeah.
I got no other devices on. How's that?
Okay.
I was thinking that the relevant people to talk to might be the harbor master and Nancy Smith, shellfish pond, and just kind of run the basic idea by them before you do much of any work on it, because Nancy is all about the health of the harbor for obvious reasons and is doing a lot of work on it. So you might just have those two conversations and see what they say.
I'd also suggest that you might contact SPAT. And, you know, the dollar amount that you're talking about is small enough that it could be possible to try to do a GoFundMe and see if there are Wellfleet residents, or whatever we call them, the non-resident taxpayers nowadays, seasonal taxpayers. They may, I mean, that's a pretty small number. That may be, but again, I would make sure that you're checking with with the shellfishermen, and I think, yeah, between the shellfish constable and between SPAT. SPAT may be interested too. I don't, but find out what their reaction is to the amount of pollution and whether or not it might impact you know, some of the farms. Just an idea.
The recycling committee might also be very helpful. I don't know. You must know people that are on the recycling committee, Carol.
Yeah, I usually attend their meetings. I missed the last one, but
that might be a great liaison for you as well.
How many,
yes, they're very interested in plastic.
how many hours a week are we asking the harbor master to contribute in terms of effort?
Well, twice a day to clean the thing. I don't know, might take half an hour. But, it's just
So
an
that's
estimate.
an hour a day.
That's why the recycling committee might be somebody that could step up for you. And they may be
Well,
able to
maybe
volunteers. Yeah.
could be identified. Yeah.
But do you need a boat to go out and empty it?
No. The picture shows one adjacent to the pier. They said they were collecting seaweed, and they said they'd had some trouble identifying the best spot for the thing. And I think it would only be out in the summer. You wouldn't keep it in the water all year round.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody objects to the idea of the Energy Committee pursuing this idea,
Or
right?
at least through that exploration, Carol, I think that would be worthwhile, and you could always you report back what they say.
Right.
Okay.
And if the recycling committee feels like we're stepping on their toes or something like that, then you'll get a sense of that too. But I think it's a great idea. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Good. Okay.
It's like a Roomba for the harbor?
Yeah. Quite so.
Okay. Is there anything else on the topic of grants you want to talk about?
No, there hasn't been any update on the two that we've applied for. The one that we worked with Cape Light Compact, the Green Communities Grant, we could hear from them any day now. They're doing reviewing and deciding. So, so that's where we're at. And then I think perhaps the next meeting, we're looking for ideas and projects for 21. So maybe the next meeting we can discuss that and prioritize.
Okay. We also need to start thinking about the report on the Green Communities Act. Isn't that an annual report that we're required to prepare? Robin?
I think Margaret Song is
Right.
the person who's involved in that and knows what the schedule is. I talked to her the other day because I looked at the Mass Data Insight for material that I needed to update the greenhouse gas report for 2020, and there was some information missing. And it turns out that Green Communities doesn't need it until August, so they haven't actually gotten, some of the information yet. She's responsible for that, and we'll be doing it.
That reminds me, did we do the solar readings
No.
as of July 1?
No, have to go actually go out there. We've been hunkering down, right? Who is it? I guess I'll go do it again. Who wants to come with me? When I
When are
finally
you going?
have to go to the library, the elementary school, and the fire station. Someone else has to know and read the meter physically.
If you pick a time where I'm available, I'd be happy to go with you.
Okay.
When are you talking about doing this, Dick?
It's a question of when we need the data for.
Yeah, this is all part of the report that goes to the green communities, and I make use of that report in updating for the Covenant of Mayors, and it'd be good to put in a complete report updated to 2020. The last one was really 2018, so we need to get that in.
So if we did a meter reading in July, would that be the right time? It's an annual meeting.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I thought we established that the last time we met, that
Yeah, okay.
July 1 is the beginning of the new fiscal year. So
Right.
as close to July 1 as possible, I think.
So,
You want an annual
all right, so sometime in July.
reading for that.
So that means that sometime this week, I guess, maybe Friday, I'll try to do it. Let me just check my schedule.
All right, Dick,
Yeah, Friday.
I can, if you need someone to come along with you, I could probably do that. I'm in Boston right now because I didn't want to miss the heat wave here, but I should be back. I should be back there Thursday or Friday.
Okay, why don't we tentatively plan, let's plan to do it Friday afternoon, 1 o'clock. And I'll send emails to everybody involved to expect us,
Great.
Okay. Sounds good.
or call. Okay, good. I'll just put that on my calendar. Anything else that we need to do to get ready for our annual reports?
Anybody hesitant about going to the town meeting at the ballpark?
Well, I expect we'll go.
Some people may, I'm curious whether some people are cautious about going to a large meeting, even outdoors.
Well, I assume everybody will be well separated, right? Orleans, we heard a report from Orleans that it went very well. They were in a field, they were all separated. The sound was better than it was in their auditorium. So,
The big problem with Orleans seemed to be there wasn't a ready supply of water. Like people said they were sitting out there for 3 hours and dying of thirst.
well, bring water. Okay,
Will
let's,
go or not partly depends on what our numbers look like when the town meeting comes.
well, there better be a quorum, otherwise.
Very good.
there's no point to it. Okay, greenhouse gas reduction efforts. David, you have anything about that?
Yeah, a couple, two things really. One is relative to the email I sent earlier today about this Cape-wide group. And the second is to go over the feedback to the net zero presentation that I put together and we talked about initially last week. I kind of said it in the email about this new group. It's basically called the Cape Climate Action Network. It's not something that's going to have an actual, certainly not any staff or any particular power actually, but what they hope to be able to do is be a forum for towns all across the Cape to share information about various types of net zero projects. It just was formed Thursday night. That was the founding meeting. They said on my note, there were 32 people. Everybody said, yes, let's found it. It's not something that was founded officially by any one town committee or any one organization. It was just, as I said on my note, I think about half the people seemed to be from some town's energy committee, and about half were just volunteers working on climate issues in lots of different ways. And then what I sent you was, so we did two things at that meeting. One, decided to form the network, and the second was this work plan dated July 13th that I attached. And I'm sorry it was just today, but this is all happening very recently. And on that call, again, each of us as individuals said, yes, we think this is a good start for a work plan. And so it was by that group of 32 people approved. I don't know for sure how many Cape towns were represented on the call, but it was more than I expected. And no one had actually tallied it up, but off the top of my head, I want to say it was maybe 10 or 12, but I'm not positive about that. So it was just a start, and I just wanted to let everybody know that's happened. And then secondly, I suppose, although it may be inappropriate now because I just sent it to you, decide if, as an energy committee, we agree with this work plan. But we could do that at another meeting, I suppose.
Well, isn't the work plan essentially what we already think we're doing?
Yeah.
Have you changed anything we intended to do?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward, and I didn't see anything controversial in it, and it is pretty much in line with the type of work we're already doing. But I just wanted to pass it out to everybody. And I can continue to report back about this group. You know, I don't know when they're going to even meet next or how effective it's actually going to be because it's brand new. But I'll stay involved myself and I'll report back to the committee.
So I looked at the documents. It seemed to indicate all the things we're doing. I didn't see anything we're not doing.
Right.
So what exactly do you expect us to do in regard to this?
If you want to, we could vote on support for this document as a committee, but I'm worried that's premature since you just got it today. I agree that there's nothing controversial. You could do nothing about it. And that we don't have to have a vote. And then I could just be sure to stay involved, take that responsibility. And as I learn more about the development of the network, or I hear of a good idea in some other town, I can pass it on.
I mean, I think the purpose of this is to get, you know, all the town committees to, you know, to in effect be doing everything that needs to be done.
Right, right.
What value they'll bring to it, we can't tell. They could put up a lot of useful information that can be directly used by people instead of being reinvented. But we'll see.
Right, right. That's right. It's I'm saying brand new. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it'll be useful.
I think it's a good idea that we should support it, but I've got to leave to open spaces meeting. So good luck.
Thanks for joining.
Okay, all right. See you, John.
Yeah, I don't see anything objectionable at all in this plan, but as you said, we just received it today, so I don't know how appropriate it is for us to take any action. I don't think it is, but at the same time, too, David, I'd like you to just speak to the issue of if we're setting up another group, I mean, do you think it's better to just dovetail with this larger one? Or, I mean, if we're, I guess what I'm thinking about is streamlining efforts and energy, or maybe we duplicate it, or maybe it's going to do something different than what we're planning to do. I don't really know. I mean, that's why I'd like to bring that up as just a topic for other people to talk about.
I hear you, Lily. Let me address that if I could. The idea is to have either some of the larger towns on their own, but ideally to try to see about having multiple towns come together as regional groups, like we're trying to do on the Outer Cape. So we could, if we do the 5-town Outer Cape structure again, which is in process, of course, then that Outer Cape group could be a regional member of the Cape-wide group. And there are discussions going on among other towns, Mid-Cape, Lower Cape, about whether or not they want to join together as a multi-town unit, and then but also be part of the Cape-wide thing, more for sharing information and best practices and things like that, hopefully.
And the question I had was, you know, the Cape Cod Commission is actually working on this climate action plan. And they've had a series of hearings throughout the Cape, they've had several, I mean, a number of focus groups or at least just stakeholder meetings. You know, Dick and I participated in the same one. You know, and again, with the COVID situation, that's slowed down, as Hillary said. You know, I mean, how much can any one person do? But I do wonder, you know, if we're not duplicating efforts. That's all I'm saying is
Yeah, I hear you.
I
Let me,
think it's a
structure
mistake
there.
I
to
hear
get
you.
our ideas derailed by that activity. We have no idea how well they will be at actually working together. I think we've built a core here where we can go ahead and do these projects and get other people directly involved in these projects so we know in the outer Cape. I think to decide to go and see if they do it is a mistake.
Okay, Robert, let me try to clarify. I maybe gave everybody the wrong impression. I'm not suggesting we stop anything we're doing on the Outer Cape. I'm for sure in favor of going full steam ahead with our Outer Cape group. I'm only saying, and I'm taking the responsibility to do the work, that there's a Cape-wide group that's just formed. Maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. It does not stop anything that we do on the Outer Cape. The role of the Cape Cod Commission, this network is not meant to be duplicative or conflicting. The Cape Cod Commission is a planning organization. That's what they do. I think if you were asked people on this call the difference, they would say that the intention of this network is action and actual projects on the ground, kind of like we want to do on the Outer Cape. But there is actually close communication between the Cape Cod Commission and the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative that initiated this whole network in the first place. So there's a lot of conversation going back and forth. How beneficial it is, I have no idea. If it seems useless, you can be sure I'll let you know ASAP. But in the meantime, we can charge ahead with the stuff we're doing.
That sounds fine. I wasn't disagreeing with you. I just wanted to make sure that we don't think that this other thing is going to be the big whole thing and there's no point in us doing what we're doing.
No, it's going to fall to individual towns and individual regions. There's no question about it.
So this sounds like a group that wants to get together and talk about what everybody's doing, but it's still up to us to take all our own actions.
Correct. Yeah, it's all because it's going to be different for each region and each town. Absolutely right.
Okay.
So I'll just leave that as an FYI. If it becomes frustrating and useless, I'll be the first one to let you know, and I'll just say, forget about it.
Well,
all right. So my second thing, is the PowerPoint presentation? How do I do screen share again? Oh, I got it. Never mind.
on the very bottom, you you click on share screen, and then you want to share your whole screen.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that work? People see
Yep,
that?
you can see it now. Now make it full screen.
Can I make a comment? I don't mean to attack anything. I'm just concerned there's an issue about the idea of saying net zero being the do-all and end-all of what's to be said. And I don't know whether you've seen this discussion going on about various statewide proposals, some of which use net zero as the line, and the other ones who say, no greenhouse gases.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at too, is, in Dick's letter to the Nauset Regional High School, I mean, he talks about net zero in the heating and cooling. And then Bob put together this document that talks about, recreating the design and doing like an envelope net zero building. So I think we should be really clear. I mean, that's why I said put definitions in there. I don't know what direction we really should go in.
Well, I'm very
net zero is
strong
not
on
perfectly clear because
net
for instance,
zero greenhouse gas emissions.
What?
Not net zero energy. It really doesn't matter how much energy you use as long as it's all from renewable sources and doesn't contribute to global warming.
Oh, I don't know about that, Dick. I
And
mean, let's
It
say,
does, believe me.
yeah.
As
I
long
don't
as
know about that.
the amount of energy that you use is not what contributes to global warming. It's greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming.
Also, net
Normally-
zero doesn't prohibit things like trading carbon points and so forth. So it's
No,
open.
it does. Let me talk to that. When you have 10% reductions, you can trade carbon points. When you get to 100%, no greenhouse gases, you cannot use a cap and trade system because nobody's in a position to trade unless they're doing carbon capture. Then you can use it. But nobody's doing carbon capture because it's uneconomical. So
Well, I'm just telling you what I saw in the critique between those two Massachusetts competing proposals for what the state should do. And there was a significant criticism, in fact, that net zero, I mean, that's your interpretation of net zero, is that no one can generate any greenhouse gases. That's not what other people think. Now, maybe that they don't understand it.
gas. It's net zero greenhouse gas. You can't generate any greenhouse gas unless you're sequestering it on the side, which is perfectly okay. That's net zero. People talk about net zero meaning net zero energy use, which is confusing because that leads to, it's good to reduce your energy consumption to a certain point, but there's a knee of that curve where it gets very expensive, especially for buildings with large glass windows. It's okay to heat those as long as you're using air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps that don't produce any carbon dioxide.
Okay, let me propose something, everybody. These definitions are, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
These definitions are tricky, and I think I'm putting up Lily's suggestion here as an example, and I'll tell you what I mean in a second. We can actually, we don't want to be misleading, but we can decide on the Outer Cape what we mean by a net zero project, and we define it by an actual project on the ground. It doesn't, we're not, if we use a word net zero or greenhouse gas emissions reductions, we're not magically bound to what somebody else says that is. So I worry about getting overly hung up on some of these definitional things. And what I'm just thinking of now is, I have one thing that I wouldn't add, and I'll tell you why in a second, but if we simply addressed net zero and greenhouse gas emissions as our main topic, the two together, then the subsequent sections of this could define what we mean by that and what we're going to actually do on the ground.
But okay, but by net zero, are you using it to mean net zero greenhouse gas emission or net zero energy?
I'm using it both.
It can't be both. It's got to be one or the other or state them both.
Yeah, so Dick, that's why I said, I actually deleted net zero planning and implementation, and I put the title as Outer Cape Climate Action, finding responsible solutions towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions and net zero planning and implementation.
And that's, well, that's right there on the screen.
Zero, you're
That
telling
is,
me what you're zeroing.
Pardon?
Reducing greenhouse gas emissions to what point?
To
At
zero.
what point?
To zero. That's the goal. By 2050, greenhouse gas emissions have to
Yeah,
go.
but I know, I'm reading this add-on here, and there are two different things. One is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and net zero planning and implementation. They look like they're two separate things.
So how do you confine them to be one, Robert?
And the other point about this is keep in mind that there are other ways in which greenhouse gases get generated that have nothing to do with power whatsoever, with energy whatsoever. Not that we are focused on them, and not that necessarily they're significant on Cape Cod. I'm talking about agriculture.
Right.
But but this is just too wobbly. It allows people to look at this and read it in a lot of different ways.
Right, and I think we should say net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And it doesn't matter to me.
That's clear. I like that.
It doesn't matter to me if we never get to net zero on energy usage. Because as long as we're at net zero on greenhouse gas emissions, we're solving the problem. All right, the problem is climate change through greenhouse gas emissions. It's a very secondary effect as to whether or not your house is leaking heat in the winter and that warms the planet. That's not what we're dealing with.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I'm happy I'll change that slide that you see there to say that.
So when we use we should always say net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And then people will know.
Yeah.
But and at the same time too, I do think that there is, that an emphasis to reduce energy usage needs to be part of the plan. But but you agree with that anyway. Everybody here agrees with that. So are you limiting that focus by saying net zero greenhouse gas emissions? That's
So Lily, in the early stages, when you're just trying to reduce greenhouse gases a little bit, one of the easiest ways to get there is to reduce your total energy consumption. But in the end stage, it's eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, not eliminate all energy consumption. So in the early stages where we are now, conservation and reducing energy is a way of reducing greenhouse gases. But we have to remember that our goal is reducing greenhouse gases to stop climate change. Now, reducing energy consumption has other benefits in terms of the resiliency of the electrical grid. And it's all, and not building more plants, because if the only plant you're building uses carbon-based fuels, then you want to build fewer of them. But once you're saying you're not going to have any carbon-based fuels at all, it will all be solar and wind, then you no longer need to address energy reduction. That's one of the ways you get there.
Yeah, well, I as you know, I disagree with the use of wind.
I know you do, and you probably don't like nuclear either.
Well, like I said, I really think that we should be looking at that film where where Bill Gates has really gotten a team of scientists together, and he's talking about using the spent fuel rods and creating small-scale nuclear power plants. And I don't know if it's safe or not. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a researcher, but boy, that would really sure would, I think if it actually is safe, if it actually does work, that would be an amazing leap forward. And we wouldn't be having some of these discussions. We could just implement that. So I'm not saying, I worked hard to.
So far as to whether it has to be demonstrated, right?
Yeah, well, people, maybe people should be starting to have those kinds of conversations about that, because that would really make a huge difference. As long as we have these coal plants that are not shutting down here, and they're building them like crazy in China and India, we're never going to get there, really, when you think about it. And furthermore, as far as cap and trade, I think that's a serious mistake, because that becomes a Wall Street product, and it has a bubble that can burst, just like we've seen so many other Wall Street products bubble and burst. Taxes would make more sense.
Okay, let me address this separately. Nuclear plants, I'm skeptical about the safety, but I'm open-minded. The fact that they can demonstrate that they're safe and that there's no radioactive waste that somebody else has to get rid of, then we'll keep an open mind. But there's nothing you and I can do about that. That's national policy. And cap and trade has a limited lifetime of usefulness. At the beginning, when you're just getting started with solar projects, cap and trade's a good idea. So if I put up solar panels, but somebody else gets the credit for it, and I'm using non-green energy, that's a starting point. But when you get to the point where you can have no energy from non-renewable sources or from carbon-producing sources, cap and trade is no longer a tool you can use because there's nobody to trade with. Everybody's got to be at zero. So no one can trade unless they have negative. If they've got an expensive way to sequester carbon, you can trade. I'll emit a little and you'll sequester the amount. But carbon sequestration is so totally uneconomical right now, it's not even on the horizon. So leaving that aside, cap and trade goes away when you get to these higher goals because it doesn't solve a problem. Okay?
Yeah, Dick, I think that the proposal that we focus on not producing any greenhouse gas emissions is the right way to look at this. And there are many ways in which we can gradually approach that if you want to be gradual. But the ultimate answer is we're not going to put any more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
I'm agreeing with you 100%, Bob. By the way, if you have solar panels on your roof, you realize that you've traded away all the credits for it until you stop getting SRECs, and then you get 100% credit. But if you're, the Cape Light Compact has this 100% local green option for people who are using electricity. It costs about 2 to 3 cents more per kilowatt hour. But that's something we should talk about for people who want to be 100% green. They should pay for 100% green local energy.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is a great conversation, very valuable and worthwhile. It is 4:15.
Yeah.
I was prepared and I would like to go through this presentation if we possibly can.
Okay.
Because we could talk about each individual page for an hour, it seems. So this is a good conversation, but I don't have the patience to
Move
spend
it along,
3
David.
hours on this.
Thank you. Move it along.
All right. So the only thing what I'd like to do, and just humor me, please, is there's a lot of material here. I'm glad, Lily, you sent your suggestion out separately. I tried to, as you saw, have all your pages show up in the thing I did, but I just would like to go through it.
Okay.
You could all just listen a little bit. I have a few very small points to make, and then we can go back and talk about whatever you want to talk about. Because I've done a lot of preparing and I would like to make a few points. Is that all right?
Go ahead.
So first, I don't see the need to say responsible solutions because to me, it's a given that we want to be responsible about the things we do. And again, we can talk about it till the cows come home later. That's my first point. Secondly, GB, let's see. GB change, this is what I did. This is what GB did. I'm fine with the changes he made. They're perfectly fine. What I'm not fine with, and I just disagree with you on this, Lily, is I think whether it's my slide or GB's slide, I don't think any of this is alarmist. I don't think it's conjecture. It's science, pure and simple. And I am not interested in taking out the hard truth about what we're facing. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if we don't do things right as a species, it will happen. So you all may disagree with me, but I'm not interested in taking that out. And Lily, just pause, please. I can't just do all these things piecemeal. We can go back, okay?
David, if I could just make one point, and people probably will disagree with me, that would be fine. I just don't think that panicking people in a time of COVID-19 and when they're trying to make a living and they're worried about their economics is really a good thing. That's all my point was. And if you disagree with me, I don't have an issue with you leaving that in.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, let me just, again, try to get through this if I could. So under overview, it's not a huge difference overall. A lot of Lily, you kind of reworked the order of slides and renamed things and all that. And it's not a huge thing to me, but what I was trying to do with this is to have it be something ultimately that would be available and beneficial to a general audience, not just the select board, let's say, or something like that, but a general audience. And to keep it really, I was trying really hard to keep this page and the structure of the slide presentation very simple. That's why, like a newspaper reporter, I did what, why, where, when, how, who. So, and to me, that works the best. You may disagree. I know you disagree, Lily. Others may disagree.
Looks good.
So, net zero, we talked about that already. There are three definitions here. This is my original, again, trying to keep it really simple. This is what GB did. That was fine from my end. I don't know if I worry about Merriam-Webster on yours, Lily, but that's not a huge thing to me.
David, I really was just trying to bring home the point that we already discussed. So if you want to come up with the definition of net zero greenhouse gas, emissions, that's fine with me too. I just wanted to define what we were doing. That's all.
Okay. And I thought it was a really good idea, Lily, to add a definition. We can discuss if this is the right definition. I don't personally have the patience to go through this word for word now, but we can talk about it.
Don't worry about it. Just move on.
It's good to have a section on it. I think that was a great addition. So then I want to get to why it's important to reach. I think we have to, Lily, you had taken out the part where I was essentially critical of the federal administration. I don't want to take that out. I think it's stating the truth. It's exactly what's happening. It's not controversial. There are facts that demonstrate it. It's not made up. It's the truth. And so I would like to leave that part in because I think it's part of what we have to deal with.
I don't have any objection to it. I was just trying to streamline it and just make it a little bit more simple. That's all, and take out any duplication. So I don't have any disagreement. If everybody wants to keep that in, it's fine.
Okay, so I got one more thing. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's see. Okay, almost there. So under energy supply, this is the original definition I had, and then Lily, you had suggested adding, I'm going to try to find it. It's way down here.
Yeah, it's my slide 16.
There it is. Yeah. So you had suggested adding
No, it's
a sentence at the end saying, we do not endorse land-based wind turbines or wind turbines in Cape Cod Bay. And I just want to be clear, I disagree with that. Okay, those are my points. Have at it. You guys can do what you want with it.
Well, that's the only thing that I would absolutely want to make sure that we have a clear understanding that we advocate for responsible solutions that do not adversely impact the health and safety of Cape citizens. Do you disagree with that, David?
I don't want to harm anybody's health, but I don't agree with saying we're not going to deal with wind turbines at all. I just can't agree with that.
I agree with David.
I agree.
And I don't accept the premise that it adversely affects someone's health.
Same here.
So we agree with the wording, let's not
Well, I
affect
can't,
someone's health adversely, but it doesn't mean the same thing to me as it means to you, Lily.
Right.
why?
Right.
Why?
Lily, you think it's going to harm people's health, and some of us at least feel that is not going to. That's the difference.
Well, how can you look at Falmouth? You know, I mean, Falmouth is not the only place.
We can't keep on going around in circles on this.
Well, I mean,
No,
if you just
most of this committee does not agree with you, Lily. So
about
you
wind
want us to-
turbines harming people's health.
We agree not to harm people's health. We don't agree that wind turbines do harm people's health.
Right.
Can you-
That's a
can you-
disagreement. We're not going to convince. So let's move on.
Well, can I ask you, will you agree to just add at the bottom, you know, take out the last sentence, but keep in the part of responsible solutions that do not adversely impact the health and safety of Cape citizens? Will you agree to do that?
Sure. Nobody wants to endanger anybody's health.
Then I can accept that, but I do not accept that you don't recognize that wind turbines have harmed the health and safety of other Cape residents already. And, you know, and I'm highly disappointed in that, but I will accept your revisions, David, as long as you have that clause at the end of it, where it says, energy production of responsible solutions that do not adversely impact the health and safety of Cape citizens. Any other?
The only other thing I want to say about that is I think that I don't know what we're going to do about it, but this has been a long-running disagreement between you, Lily, and the rest of the committee, and it's probably just going to come up again someday when something else comes up, and I don't know if we can do anything about it because you are very firm in your position and your belief, and the rest of us are firm in our belief and our position, and so I don't know what we're not convincing each other either way. It's not happening.
Well, can I have the liberty to put this on a future agenda so that we can move on with this? Where we
As
can.
long as you present the arguments as opposed to telling us to go read something.
I will present the arguments. Yes, I will be glad to do that.
Fine, let's move on, David.
So the only other, I don't have a whole lot else. The only other thing I wanted to note is I thought that the points Suzanne, Carol, and Robert made were very good. I put them in the email so everybody could see them. And I hadn't gotten to figuring out how to represent them in this document, but I'll work on that. I think they're very good. I think GB made a few other little editing changes here and there that were good. You know, this I thought was one, but he made a few others. I don't think I bothered to put them in because they were very small, like adding a comma, things like that. So what I will be happy to do is, based on this conversation today, and I'm clear about, in my own mind, you may disagree about what the next version of this will look like. And so I will take the responsibility for redoing this, sending it back out, and we can take it from there, either at the next meeting or however you want to deal with it.
I just point out that it seems to me that it's not clear who the audience is.
Right.
And I think that you're at a point now where you've got a pretty significant working document here. And I think that when you come back, there are really two pieces. One is this document, but time to start thinking about an executive summary.
Yeah.
And the main thing on the executive summary is short.
Yep. No, I agree completely. I think my idea of the audience was the general public, simply for a substantial kind of community meeting sort of a situation. But even for that, we would for sure need an executive summary.
Is an executive summary equivalent to a mission statement?
Oh,
Well,
executive
not
summary.
exactly. It could include that.
It's going to say what the problem is, what you're proposing as a solution and what the actions are that you want to take.
Yeah, and that I did actually write a short version of the original little white paper I wrote a little while back that led to this. I did write a one-page version of that. I don't know that I feel comfortable that it's good enough yet, but I'll go back to that because it was meant to be an executive summary of a sort, and I'll work on that a little bit more and make sure that it doesn't conflict with the kinds of things.
It does not negate at all what you're doing, but if you are a management consultant, what you're really looking is you have two deliverables here. One is the working papers or what it is that you're providing. You can be hopeful you'll give the audience's attention, but that's, especially in this world with Zoom, very hard. But the other is the piece that you know people are going to see, which will be, it's called it's really, fundamentally, this is what the issue is, this is what we want to do, and this is how we propose doing it.
Right, correct. Yep, I'm with you. Yep. Okay, so I'll get you guys an updated PowerPoint, and I'll do a draft of an executive summary. I'll send it out.
Okay, but David, the net result of this presentation is that you're going to convince people it's a good idea to do something. Now you're preaching to the choir. Most of the people who are going to sit through the presentation already agree with that. We should be doing something. The question is what? And that's what we really need to start addressing.
Right, and I would submit that the core of that, and we could reword it, we could bring in agriculture, we could do whatever, but the core of what you just said, which is what I was trying to do, are those 5 areas that we could work on. And
Right.
we could just, again, we can change them, whatever, but that's the beginning, because the point's a good one of saying, okay, what are we actually going to do? Well, here are 5 ideas we could do. We should decide, can we do all of them, one of them, whatever.
And which are the 5 now? Which slide is that?
I'll go back to that 1 second. Sorry, it's not really this long anymore. It's just that I have things doubled up because I was trying to make it clear. Okay, here we go. So here's 3, that's 2 more.
So 5. Energy efficiency, electric powered. Okay, these are the 3. Is there another one?
And these 4 and 5.
Okay. Fine.
So, I mean, clearly one of the issues is that's a lot. And even if we develop, which I hope we can, a robust Outer Cape group of covering 5 towns, it's a lot. And we'd have to figure out a way to have a whole team of some sort, maybe somebody from each town, work on each one of these kind of independently as a team or as a project. But I'm not sure, even just writing it, I was thinking, oh man, but I'm not sure we have the bandwidth to do all of these at the same time, even though I wish we did or hope we do.
Well, but we as a group are not going to do anything about, say, about having a renewable electric supply. That's going to go to the Cape Light Compact, right?
Well, they would be our big partner on that, but I'm hoping we can do more than just Cape Light Compact and get some innovative arrangements with local banks, perhaps, and with the state additionally. But yeah, a lot of it's Cape Light Compact for sure.
Oh, you're saying this is to finance solar panels on people's houses?
Yeah, or decide that we can do some kind of bulk buying arrangement again or something like that.
Okay.
I was wondering.
How we do this is, I think I would hope that we could go through maybe at our next meeting all 5 of these and really drill into them.
Right.
You might want to make sure you add one more slide that is, what have we already done?
Yep. Can you do that?
Because you've done a lot.
Yeah.
Right, and there were two energy fairs that you were not on the committee for that have been done too, and those were highly educational, as well as the first Solarize project, which
Yep.
you were
First
not
and
here
second.
for.
The second one was even broader than the first.
Well,
Yeah.
we can list both solarizes and the whole Outer Cape Energized thing. I already have a separate presentation about that, so I can make a slide about what we've done so far, which is a great idea, Jeff. That's really good.
And you can break it up in terms of, this is what the committee has proposed and done for the municipality, and then this is what we've done for the residents. So you
Right.
can really distinguish between those two.
Right. And the other thing, by the way, that struck me, speaking of municipality, when we talked to Hillary, is it's an example of the limits of a town, any town department. I'm not being critical of her. We can't work on all this other stuff. What we can do, kind of like we did with Outer Cape Energize or Solarize, is we can go beyond that. We're not obliged to only work on, for example, municipal buildings, because Outer Cape Energize and Solarize before was dealing with individual residents. Doesn't we can keep doing that?
Yes. There is another aspect which you didn't work in, which is having metrics, having quantitative goals and having metrics to measure progress against it, which
Yeah.
means greenhouse gas inventory is the buzzword for that.
Well, the reason I didn't put that in, Dick, I thought about that too, of course, is that we don't have that done, and I was hoping we could just get moving on some of this other stuff. But in an ideal world, we'd set out goals ahead of time, of course. I don't know how to do that.
I realize this is recorded, but you might want to have the Energy Committee take a little bit of credit for the streetlights.
Mhm.
Because that has been a huge savings for this town.
Right.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it was 1 year before we established our
Like I
baseline.
said, I'm okay with stretching and having the
But that's
committee.
brownie points. That's not, the reality is it was a big savings. Right?
Yeah, but we were important in getting that done. Jeff is right.
Right.
Even though it's not,
Well, the whole green community. I mean, we made the green community happen.
Yeah, and I'll put
Committee.
I mean, we were able to do that.
participation on as well.
Well, having been there, I think it was the Cape Light Compact that did all the work.
That's why I said I was stretching
Funded
the
it.
truth a little.
Funded it and actually did all the work.
Yep.
But if we didn't ask for it, it wouldn't have happened, so.
Yep.
You take
Yeah,
some
no,
credit.
that's great.
Again, nobody in your audience is going to object. And-
What we've done might even be 2 slides, Jeff, not 1. We'll see.
Sorry.
No.
Well, but it's gone, you know, the advantage of saying what we've done is to say it's more of the same. And we've already done it and it doesn't hurt and we make residents make money at it. So it's painless.
Well, and also it just generally gives the message that there are things that can be done. It's not hopeless. You know, here's some actual things that have been done. It worked, it saved people money, and this is going forward from there.
And
Yeah,
that-
you know,
that's my point was that the people that are probably going to listen to any dialogue we have are people that really want to do something. They already have the background, they already have the knowledge, and you know, they want to know what they can do now. So I think that's an important point to realize. And I think, you know, if you look at the people in Wellfleet, I think people in Wellfleet, for the most part, I mean, a vast majority are very well educated. So, you know, they want to know what else they can do.
But you know, there's plenty to do there, but there's so much that we can do that we don't have power to make some of these changes. I'm just thinking about the net zero new construction, for example. That's going to come into the building code probably before too long at the state level, but it may take a while. My thought was, let's be educational about it. If we had specific meetings with contractors, tradespeople, and building inspectors to talk about this stuff, in the beginning, and I know maybe forever, some of them are going to say, oh, no, it's terrible, it's awful, you know, blah, blah, blah. But if we at least have some dialogue, we could begin to provide information. There's a huge amount of activity going on all around the world, really, about passive houses and net zero building codes and these things.
But David, you just switched the definition of net zero from the one we adopted to the other one, okay? Because net zero greenhouse gas emissions is not the same as net zero new construction, which means net zero energy. Okay? And the building code is a way to get there to reduce the energy you use, but it doesn't have to go to net zero, to zero, as long as the energy you are using produces no greenhouse gas.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant was to say net zero new construction. I understand how it would seem like what you said, but what I meant was how we handle new construction with our building codes is a component of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and getting to net zero of energy.
Right.
That's all.
And
May I come back?
if people do build a net zero house, I mean, we would certainly want to endorse that and encourage that. So, I mean, I think that's an important point, and that's why I wanted to have that conversation. I do think this is important. I mean, if there is a, you know, if we can educate people and they are interested in new construction or renovations, and they do have that information, and they do see that there's a short payback, and it's, you know, maybe more money up front, I think that there's a case to be made, and I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
And I think people who are building houses can drive this too, if they see that there's value in it, Lily, to your point. And that will be that, and their contractors may try to talk them out of it, but in the end, they'll follow the money because their customers are the people building the home, the residents.
Right. So a net zero energy usage house will certainly give you net zero greenhouse gas emissions. But you can achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions somewhat short of that goal by having a reasonably efficient, even a highly efficient house.
That's
It's not
true.
clear the very last step is the most cost-effective way to get to zero greenhouse gas emissions. You might just switch to all electricity and then be profligate.
Well, except we don't want to just do that. There's also the reduction of energy usage. And so if you go with a passive house, which is very energy efficient, then you're using less energy. That's a good thing.
Well, let's talk about the thought experiment. I produce everything with my own solar panels, and I have a huge battery bank. What do you care how much energy I use? It's all
We should lower
greenhouse gases.
beneficial to lower the energy usage, and we would try to convince you through rebates or whatever to put more insulation in your house, whatever.
Okay.
Can I try to get you guys back onto the process?
Yeah. All right.
And two things come to mind that you might want to consider as you're looking at the steps ahead. One really quick one and one later. And that is, I really think that what Dick wrote in the piece about the school and what you guys are talking about, where it's the distinction between net zero emissions versus what is net zero emissions versus net zero energy. That's an article for Ed Miller at the Provincetown Independent. And I think you want to be including him as one of the steps. He's wanting to be a local paper looking for articles. So I think one of the steps along your process ought to be as you develop this piece out, using him to help get the, amplify the message, what you guys are trying to do. I think you have a real short-term hit he'd probably be wicked interested in this whole concept about net zero emissions and what this energy committee is asking of the building, the high school building project. That's a quick win. And then you're building up so that when you've got these materials at that later stage, you've got your document and you got your executive summary. Before you're even giving it, you're wrapping in the local press who's looking at issues like this.
So we're still in dialogue. Let's talk about that, Jeff. We're still in dialogue with the building committee. What time do you think strategically is the best to start making this a public controversy with Ed Miller?
Now.
Before we get their agreement? Now?
Now.
No.
He completely shut you guys off on your first letter. You've now responded. I don't know what's the issue of telling the public what the hell is going on here.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. If this is really important, I thought that his response, I could read from your letter of his response to your committee was a complete, utter lack of respect and an insult, in my opinion.
I have a very thick skin. I don't mind if people insult me and ignore me, as long as ultimately I get my way.
I think this should be surfaced, and this is something that the community should be addressing at this point before even if we don't make this decision. You guys, as a committee, were so supportive of this particular need, and I think that it's important.
Yeah.
Well,
The other thing is Dick's letter is one thing, and then of course Bob is asking for something totally different. I think we have to get our ducks in the row first. I think that if we're trying to work within the system by getting a letter together and having the select boards, I'm so sorry about that, having the select boards sign on to it, I think we should work that process first instead of going to the
All
meeting.
I'm advocating is I think it's time to educate the public on what it means when you say net zero, because I think people are, if this committee has been confused over net zero, you got to imagine that the whole community has no clue what anyone's talking about.
Yep.
And that doesn't have to necessarily be aggressive against the school committee. But I think that what you're saying is a really important message.
Yeah.
I got to shut up. I'm not advising to your committee or a liaison. I'm sorry.
No. I think it's the whole.
Hey, you're an emeritus member of the committee, right?
Emeritus, yeah.
The whole role of the press in this process and any process that matters for a community is huge. And so specific ideas like I'm all in favor of getting the press involved. For sure, the province and independent. I've talked to Ed Miller about most of these things already. And to me, there's no downside in having an educational piece specifically focused on the new regional high school. As a title of an article, that'll get everybody's attention, just the title. And then they could use it to talk about different options, what's been decided so far. I don't even know, I think a number of the towns have put off voting on this for their part, for one thing, but Ed could kind of summarize all of that about where each town stands and just a whole summary of the new high school project would be a great article for a newspaper.
We've been told that the school committee is going to be removing the vote for our upcoming one. It's still in the ATM, but it's supposed to be.
No, it's not. I got
did they
one from
remove it?
Dan Horton. It was definitely withdrawn.
Okay, because I looked at it with Dan about a couple of days ago. But yeah, if that's been, they said they were going to, but it was still in the last, whatever.
Well, the last draft of the ATM that he circulated, I guess it goes to committee chairs, but that article was removed. So they have withdrawn the high school vote.
Yeah, well, FinCom is like doing the votes on the different things, but when we looked at it, but whatever, we have another meeting coming up. So I'm sure you're right. That's what they said anyway. Nobody wants to be voting on this in September.
Right.
So what is the new plan, Jeff?
The state has granted an extension into next spring, so the idea is it will come up in the normal annual town meeting 2021. If, who knows what normal will mean by then.
Right.
Right.
So therefore, there is more time, you know, and
No, there isn't, there isn't. Let's talk about this from the school committee's viewpoint. They made an application. The application was specific enough that they can't go from a LEED silver to a LEED platinum or LEED without changing the top dollar. The problem is they can go from the way they heat it to the way, from one form of heating to another without affecting the bottom line and the amount of the loan. And that's what we want them to look at. For example, they're cooking with gas. That's great, but they could cook with electricity. That's not a design that affects the overall building plan. That was something they brought up. But heating is another issue. If they're going to heat it, the question is, will the existing infrastructure support using ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps,
Right.
which is an all-electric heater? And that's what I had thought they were going to look at when I left the committee meeting, and was disappointed that they just sent back, we can't do anything. So maybe, and that's what I wrote back. You know, I thought you were going to look at this.
I agree with you, Dick. I think that's a brilliant way of looking at this. And I do think that they could do a ground source heat pump, and they could convert the cooking facilities into electric. That would not be an issue. I tried to find information if there was any state funding, because Governor Baker has indeed made this decree about 2050. So, you know, I've two people have gotten back to me, and they didn't have the answers. The last thing I've heard is that Margaret Song might know if there's any state funding. Will you look into that, Dick? Will you ask her?
No, I haven't. The other thing is,
Would you ask her to see if there is?
It's not clear to me that it requires state funding, because it's not clear to me it's more expensive.
You don't
Even
think
the
the
capital
ground,
budget.
you don't think the ground source heat pump would be more expensive than conventional gas heating?
I
From
think
everything
it's
I've read,
comparable on a
sounds like
large
it is.
building.
What?
I think on a large building, they're comparable in costs. In a house, it's a little easier to put a box in because you have to bring in all that construction equipment and drill holes. But when you're doing a large building, you've got all that construction equipment in place. It's not necessarily more expensive than the alternative.
So Dick, you sent this letter on the 16th, last Thursday, right?
Yeah.
So I assume you haven't heard anything.
No, I haven't heard back. But look, let me ask the question again. Do you guys think we should now start working the Provincetown Independent, that I'll start drafting a letter and circulating amongst the group?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should.
I don't think so. I think drafting a letter and bringing it to the select boards, and select boards sign on to it makes more sense. And you know, this is all public record. I mean, he can go and listen to this committee meeting. He can go listen to select board meetings. I don't think it's our, you know, I don't think we should have the authority. I don't think we have the authority to do something like this. And I think it could backfire tremendously.
Now, we have the authority to talk to the press. And we even at the last select board meeting, if you listen, there was encouragement to go, you know, push this forward. Let's put
Yeah,
it.
push it forward, but I mean, but
That means getting publicity.
Yeah, but we don't want to make have any kind of backfiring. You know,
what are you worried about? I don't understand what you're worried about. I really don't.
Well, I don't want to. offend the select boards. I mean, I think we need their support.
Oh, I think the select board's behind us.
The only concern that, when you talk about the ground, I don't know if there are many implementations the size of this. So I think that what Dick is really making clear is that even if we can't go that way today, we want to make sure that there is a migration plan. And if we're talking about a natural gas system, it's a lot harder to figure out what the migration plan would be.
Right.
And what is the delta? Nobody seems to know. It would sure be nice to see this building committee at least come back and tell us what the delta is. How much more would it be? Because nobody has any numbers that I've seen.
Right. And when they give us a delta, they gave us a delta for energy conservation for the whole building, which, as I pointed out, is not what we're asking for. We're asking to change the heat source.
And I told you that when I looked at the last draft that I had seen, it was about 12 million for the, what do they call it, heating, the HVAC.
Total.
That's the number that, you're looking at a base. And then it's like, okay, are we talking then 15 million? Is it worth the additional? I mean, that's what I'm saying. And I don't think
On a $12 million budget, assuming that's probably not going to make any difference. Because
that's what that is bringing. Just under 12 million was in the figures that I have.
Digging holes in the ground. Digging holes in the ground.
I think, we're not engineers. We're not a consulting firm. We can't solve this
Some
problem
of us are not engineers.
now on the phone. Well, but you know what I'm saying. I think the thing we can push for is to get this project reconsidered and studied to give us the delta, to give us the ground source is good or is bad or is fat, is whatever it is. It's not there, we can make any kind of case we want to each other into the select board, but in the end, I could envision a professional engineering firm does a report that says, here's A, B, and C options or whatever in terms of heat source, energy efficiency, LEED, silver, gold, platinum. That's just a baseline to then you have some real data to look at.
But silver, gold, platinum is the wrong question.
I don't think it's the wrong question.
The right question is, do you use natural gas as your source of heat or ground source heat pumps as your source of heat?
Dick, I think they're both equally important. I don't think there's something magical about the heating system. I understand your reasoning, I understand the logic, and I support it. I'm saying, is that all we care about? That's not all I care about.
Well, what my goal is zero greenhouse gas emissions, right?
And it would be really great to have lower energy usage.
I think that's a second order effect if we're talking about climate change.
But I'm talking about designing a school that's going to last for a long time. Why not at least look at the numbers for what it would take to get the various levels of LEED certification and an altered, more environmentally friendly heating system? Why couldn't both things be studied?
I think, okay, I'll tell you why, because I believe they have been studied, and I actually respect their opinion. They picked the knee of the curve, the place at which the added investment was not cost effective if all you're doing is energy conservation. That's why I believe they picked the sweet spot. Now, let's get to the real issue of the heating systems.
How do we know they picked the sweet spot?
Because there were enough smart people on it. They did study all of them. They did look at platinum. They decided $12 million or $10 million or $6 million more was not a good investment. I don't care. All I care is greenhouse gas reduction because it's climate change we're interested in. And extra energy is not going to have any effect on climate change. Changing the heat source will affect climate change.
I agree with you. I just still care about using less energy. That's me personally. I'm not going to change my mind about using less energy.
Well, in any event, it's an issue that we should look at both of them, but
You know, I do agree with the both of you in many regards, but I'm not sure that we can get to where David wants to go. But I do think it's more realistic and reasonable to think that we can get where Dick wants to go. You know, if we could do both, I think that would be ideal, but I don't think that that's gonna, you know, work in this situation.
Well, just to muddy the waters even more, there's a whole mini industry now, and tons. I've been reading some, as have people from Truro. This passive house approach, which can apply to much more than just houses. It's not a very useful term when thinking about a school, but the passive house science is actually quite good and well developed, and that can be done actually, again, it muddies the waters even more, separately from, and they have been done, it's been done distinctly away from, ignoring the LEED designations. But it does have to do with energy efficiency and usage.
right, it's just another standard of energy efficiency which exceeds the LEEDs. And I agree that the passive house is probably, if I were going for energy efficiency, the best standard to use. And it comes with funding. So when we're dealing with housing, that's the way to go. Because if you build a passive house, low-income housing project, you get 70% reimbursement.
Right.
Absolutely phenomenal reimbursement, right?
Yeah, except they're trying to push in Truro with their affordable housing project. They're trying to get they were unhappy with how the RFP was written apparently, and they're trying to get the developer, I think they selected the developer to be responsive to these sorts of issues, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and it's not going well at all. So it's not an easy thing. It's not a slam dunk necessarily. I don't know what the problem is there exactly.
Well, okay.
That's out of our town.
I'm going to
All right,
encourage
let's hear from the other people on the committee. Do you think the time we should now begin to start formulating a public relation, make this a wider, more publicly known? So Suzanne and Carol, I'd like to hear from you and GB.
Yeah, I do think so. As you know, I mentioned that to you in an email. I do have PR background somewhat in some capacity. So my idea of feeding the story wouldn't be so much in a letter, but a press release, which would be a shortened article with a headline and framing the story to them, framing the story, and then they can fill in the pieces with more information that they need to get by interviewing the various parties involved.
Right. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, Carol, what do you think?
I do feel like we should go ahead and involve the press. Although I'm a little uncomfortable since you haven't had a response to your latest letter, but I think they blew the concerns off, and it's time to use what resources we have to make the case.
GB, what's your opinion?
I think that it might be helpful to meet with, who's the guy on the Independent, Miller?
Ed Miller, yeah.
Yeah, it might be helpful to meet with Miller, have him come to a committee meeting and get his thoughts on how he feels we should go about expanding our PR effort. In other words, rather than just simply prepare something amongst ourselves and send it off to him, see what he has to say about how he thinks we could go about this in the most successful way.
Yeah, can I add something? I agree with that idea, but also, do we just, I think the Independent is great. I've been thinking of them too. But don't we, if we're going to make that effort, shouldn't we reach out to all media sources and see who bites?
Yep.
This is Gorham. I agree with that as well. I'm just thinking preliminarily, speak with Miller, add that question to the mix, and make it clear that this isn't some exclusive connection with the Independent. We're just looking for useful information on how to go about this in the most effective way, using the resources of the Independent and any other vehicles that might be out there that would be helpful to us.
GB, I worry a little bit about trying to use Ed Miller as our PR advisor. I don't know. There's something that I kind of like the idea. Ed's a great guy. I love talking to him and all that, but I don't know. He might say, I'm not here to design your outreach. I'm here to report on the news.
Yeah, but
I'd like to point out that Teresa,
Right.
the former member of this committee.
Right.
But try to ask a higher level question. Should we start the public relations aspect of this? I think we can write it as well as they can, and their writer, Casey Myers, is a good writer. She can help. If she's the one who's assigned to it, it's not going to be Ed Miller. It's going to be Casey Myers who writes the article. So that's tactics. The question is now the time strategically for us to start making this a wider audience? And I think the answer is 5 or 6 to 1, right? Or are you, Lily, are you willing to go along with doing it now too?
I just think that strategically, as you bring up, it may be the wrong time. I think it might be a wiser thing to try to work the other angle of, which we all agreed to with Orleans and Truro, was to gather information, write a letter, go to the select boards, get the select boards to sign on and send these letters. I think there's a much stronger case to be made once that happens, and all the towns are engaged in the same effort, and then to go, if the press doesn't pick up on it, then there would be a stronger case to be made with the media.
Okay.
What's wrong with the select board simply getting on the bandwagon that you guys are riding? I mean, what's the difference?
Excuse me, the select board looked at the first letter and said they supported it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
You have a
Until
hook right
something
now.
happens after that, I don't think we need to go back to the select board. With every step, they said, yeah, go for it. See what.
Dick, I propose that you put together, if you would, a kind of a draft press release. Maybe you'll even work with Suzanne because she's got some background in that, and then send it out and we can, work on it.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you, Suzanne, because we can phrase it as there's a dissension in the committee. We don't know whether to oppose the high school altogether or because we're having trouble,
I wouldn't go that way. I would just use it to hook the net zero gas emissions. That is such a win. And say everybody is confusing it, and what we're simply saying is net zero of fossil fuel emissions.
I hear you, Jeff.
That is the hook, guys.
But the thing about it here is Jeff, you have to realize that we met with members of the Orleans and Truro energy committees, climate action committee,
and they're totally in agreement.
Well, they're not necessarily. I mean, Bob wrote up this document about this, about using the passive home concept. So, I mean, we should be on the same, we should have a concerted effort with these other towns. I mean, if they're saying one thing and we're saying something else, I don't know, maybe Dick, if you wanted to talk to them and see if they would agree with that tactic. And I mean, and I don't know, David, are you okay with them putting out some kind of a press release, public service announcement that isn't talking about that, it's just talking about the heating system and the cooking facilities? I don't know if you're okay with that, David.
I don't know if a good reporter is going to just write what we want them to write. My hope actually is that a good reporter will do some background research, talk to multiple people, and part of what interests me, and Jeff got this going, is to get the sort of issue out into the open, out into the public. And it doesn't have to be perfect or fully formed. We don't have to even all agree, but at least let's get it out there that the basic idea is we're hoping that the regional high school can be made more in keeping with where things are going with carbon emissions, period. And how we do that, what we call it, is part of what would be out there in the article or subsequent article about different options. That's okay with me.
Yeah, okay. So I get the sense that except for Lily, everybody feels we should start phrasing an article. And I think I'll take a cut, and Suzanne, I don't know if you want to take a cut, and we'll work together, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, and Jeff,
One last point, and that
make
is
the distinction between what net zero means to separate those issues so that our goal is greenhouse gas reduction because it's climate change, but that along the way, the most efficient buildings you can build may be the right thing to do. We have to trade that, but mostly we got onto it because we don't want to do a $10 million revision of the system, throw out the heating system in a dozen years from now. If we're going to build this, we should build it right the first time.
Right.
and emphasize how strongly this committee has supported this.
Right, yes, right. Okay, I got my marching orders. What else is on our agenda?
Minutes, approval of minutes.
We don't have any yet, so we're off the hook on that.
Old business, new business?
Yes, any old business anyone else would like to bring up?
We're still cranking away on the consolidated bill. I actually had a conversation with Mark Vincent, who's the head of the DPW, and he came back with he'd like to have a more recent sample of a consolidated bill, because the best I was able to come up with on the first round was one from 2014. So I'm going to see what I can come up with on that. But I realized after the conversation that I don't have a clear appreciation of how the various entities who get electric bills handle the chargeback situation, which became a factor in my mind because of budgeting reasons. If the library has to come up with a budget, they got to figure out what their energy cost is going to be. If the fire department has to come up with a budget, or the police department, they have to know that as well. I've requested another conversation with Mark. He sent me back an email and said he's really going to be tied up this week. Maybe we can have a discussion next week. And I said, fine, whenever it's convenient. But just for my own understanding here, Dick, one of the main reasons for that you would indicate for going with this consolidated bill is so that when we get credits from the solar array, that they would just be applied to that bill. But if we have to give the various entities some idea of what their actual cost of electricity is, let me ask if this statement is correct. If we get, if the town gets a credit on its electric bill as from the solar array production, and let's say it amounts to, just hypothetically, 30% of the Eversource consolidated bill, is it perfectly reasonable then to spread that figure back to the various accounts at 30%? In other words, here's your electric bill and your actual cost is 30% less.
No, I would think the right way to do it is the town treats that money as income from a separate source like a real estate tax and just books it. Because most of the money is actually the lease payment on renting the landfill. So think of it as 100%. It's a lease payment to the town for renting the landfill, and individual entities should be under the same pressure to keep their costs down that they always are. And the town just has a source of income.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
In other words, from an economic viewpoint, you want to make electricity look as expensive as possible to the people who are using it, so that they will do everything they can to use less of it.
Sounds good to me.
So, you know, on the chargeback basis, do what you're doing and just consider all this thing as money that comes into the town that goes into the general coffers.
Yep, I'm with you 100%.
All right, as our finance guy, Jeff, do you agree?
I do.
Okay, good. Also, it saves less work, right? You don't have to worry about prorating anything or computing anything.
Well, that's true, but I do feel that if you had to do that, it could be a very simple process.
It could be, but we don't want them to think electricity is cheaper.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's helpful to me because now that I know that position, I know how to discuss it with Vincent.
Okay. All right. Any other old business? Any other new business?
Well, I just have, I had, this goes back to the regional high school thing. And I'm not an expert in this field by any stretch, but the question that came into my mind is I was just sort of, reading the paper and several days running, they were talking about interest rates and how they're hitting new lows and so forth. And I was just thinking, we're all worried about the cost of the upgrade to the high school. And I'm sitting there thinking, is there any way that we can lock in one of these? Is there any way that whoever's responsible for, bonding the cost of the high school upgrade, if we ever get to that point, is there any way that they can lock in the interest rates that are currently out there?
So I did participate in one of their meetings, and let's say they spend a huge amount of their mind share on how to lock in the best interest rate and the timing and so on. Okay, so they think about it a lot.
Okay.
Because it makes a huge difference to them.
Hopefully they can do something about it, but I mean,
right now, they are constantly monitoring what the latest project is getting in the way of rates and so on.
Okay.
Right, so it's not, they're well aware of the issue.
Good.
Dan Hort is on the payroll through the end of the month. And his expertise is finance. So if you've got a question like this, don't hesitate to ask him. He's got an extra month of pay to just hang around until the new town administrator arrives.
Well, I'm not necessarily looking for an answer. I'm just hoping that, you know, the powers that be, somebody out there is thinking about that, because these rates are just absurdly low, and it's always a possibility they may go lower, but it's a gift horse that you're looking at, and who knows when it's going to go away.
Not soon, because I don't think we're going into a runaway inflation. I think we're going into a depression.
Well, the president said we have a V.
Okay. Anyway, that's not our expertise. Anything else new? No? Okay.
And to adjourn?
All right. It's been fun. It is. It's a nice group. Thank you all.
Did anybody else make a motion, second the motion?
Second.
Who did? Oh, JB? Okay.
We should do a roll call, but everybody just wave.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Okay.